First of all,
Speaking.
thank you so much for meeting with me. I'm super excited about this.
Oh, thank you, Abby. So, pleasure speaking with you.
Okay, first question I have for you. I really want to know a little bit about your educational background. I know you went to UMich, and I have some questions about that a little later, but
Yeah, tell me what. Well, specifically going to the college years, or even before that.
college, yeah.
Yeah. So, we were just talking before the interview about growing up in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I set my sights around junior, senior year of high school on being a composer. I had a really influential French horn teacher growing up, um, named Target Linder, and he was a great guy. He was finishing his grad school at UNC Greensboro, and had worked with composers and like kind of was a very knowledgeable musician himself. And when I was coming up, I was a pretty weak horn player. He kind of realized that. I've always been a pretty good pianist, and I've always kept my piano chops going. I had started by that point to compose and conduct a little bit, and piano and horn. And by horn ended up being kind of the last on the ladder, and I just did not have the hours to dedicate to make that really tough instruments sound great.
Yeah.
And rather than like beating me to a pulp or whatever, he was instead like super understanding of the whole thing and just helped what he could. And he knew I was playing horn mainly just to be in a large ensemble so I could learn about being a composer, which is kind
That's
of what
really
it was.
neat.
It's kind of what it was.
Yeah.
Um, I've always loved listening and that kind of thing more than anything, more than playing. And he really supported it. And he told me one day, your mom told me you've got some scores you've been working on. Can I see them? And he quickly got a sense that I was like really serious about it or becoming serious. Because I showed him an orchestra piece, a couple orchestra pieces I was working on, and a band piece, and these large ensemble pieces. And he said, "Well, what are you thinking for college?" And I said, "Well, I've always planned on being a lawyer. I guess I'm going to law school. I think because I love academics and I love public speaking and all that kind of thing."
Yeah.
And he said, "Yeah, I love how you didn't say music because like every sentence you say ends in something about music." And he was one of the people that gave me a major wake up call in that regard. And he's actually the very first person that said, "You're a drum major in band. I know you love band. Have you heard the USC marching band?" And I said, "South Carolina? Oh, I don't know." He said, "No, not that USC. The University of Southern California, out in LA." And to me, that was so foreign. I was like, "No, but I'll check them out." And I listened to that band that night, and I was like, "Whoa, what's going on here? This is amazing." And then I started reaching to the music school. This might have been like sophomore year of high school.
Hmm.
And I realized, wait a minute, USC is where Frank Kelly teaches? Oh, wow. Oh, wait, USC is where Warren Lordson teaches? Oh, wait, USC is where Bruce Broughton and Jerry Goldsmith went to school, like as composers, like these heroes of mine from the film world. And I started realizing, like, wait a minute, like that's like the dream school. If that could ever work out, and if I am going to be a composer, I got to go there and nowhere else. Um, so I applied, thinking it was a total crapshoot. A couple years later, did not have a composition teacher or anything officially. I mean, besides a couple really amazing mentors like that guy, I didn't have anyone helping me with my pieces. So I didn't know what the competition was and whatever. And I later found out that like over 100 or more people apply to that program every year. It's like a very competitive, great place. So I thought, there's no chance. This little guy from North Carolina. But that March of senior year, I ended up getting the letter, and it was like a life changing thing. It was like, okay, I'm in this now,
That's
and
awesome.
truly ever since then, it's never been looking back. And had the most incredible experience at USC. Really, really intense, rigorous kind of instruction and stuff, but loved every minute of it. And sophomore year or so, you brought Michigan. Sophomore year, I kind of got obsessed with the music and the life of Michael Dougherty and kind of how he, as a composer, um, is writing very sophisticated music that's very well crafted, but in a pop culture kind of
Yeah, yeah,
idiom.
yeah.
You know, like I like that it's highbrow meets lowbrow kind of a thing. Like he's not afraid at all to do a piece about used car salesmen or pink flamingos in front yards or UFOs or more serious topics lately too. Of course, like he's written pieces for about Rosa Parks and with the presidents and various cultural things. But I just loved his music, and I thought he's someone I really want to work with. And I later found out that working with him was almost like an apprenticeship. I've done a lot of, I've assisted him a good bit and helped on, um, helped do typesetting and engraving scores and making parts and that kind of thing, and just assisting him a lot. I've learned so much over the years, and worked with everybody from Michigan, of course, too. Christy Custer and Evan Chambers, all these great, very different voices. Everyone's so different. But Michigan was its own special, amazing place.
I mean, Michigan is like a microcosm for saxophone. It's a whole, yeah. And
It
I
really
believe
is.
you were there when Cinto was there. Is that correct?
I sure was. I used to shop at Santa's grocery store. Uh, I remember once being in Bush's grocery store right off of Main Street in Ann Arbor, and saw this like older gentleman like just dancing like just going crazy in the middle of the aisle, like the cereal aisle. He was just gyrating. I was like, what is going on there? Oh wait, that's Donson. An enthusiastic, amazing, full of life guy. Just briefly met him on occasion. Um, I'm embarrassed to say this. It's going to sound like I'm bragging. I don't mean to sound bragging about something, but he gave me one of the nicest compliments I've ever gotten, and I kind of knew what he meant when he said it. Because I had the great privilege during my master's of being in the symphony band, the same group he played with on that famous Russia tour in the late '60s, and there's all this
Mm-hmm.
history of that. I've never been in an ensemble about which I felt more pride and just like, and Michael Haycock was gracious enough to let me be the pianist for the group for those 2 years, and I there a lot of pianists are really great solo players, like way better than I could ever hope to be. People are so virtuosic and whatnot. But there aren't a lot of players that are really interested in ensemble playing.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of like a lesser thing, and they're not used to working with a conductor, and it ends up the piano often just doesn't add much, if anything. And I was always like, I want to really make the piano a part of this group, and really, I took the ensemble playing really seriously. I felt okay working with the conductor. And he came up to me after one of our performances. We were doing a celebration, 80th birthday for H. Robert Reynolds. And he came up to me afterwards and he said, I want to tell you, you are a hell of an ensemble pianist. Like, you know the timing and you know what the conducting. That's a rare thing. Keep that up. And he's like the only person, truly the only musician to ever notice me in that respect, and like notice a specific thing about a specific player. And he gave a very personal comment. And it was a 10-second exchange. I mean, but I've taken that little moment with me as a great memory of Don Senta.
That's
I can't
awesome.
imagine what the people that worked with him must have had. They must have had that every week and more. Just amazing.
Yeah, he's like a founding father of the saxophone, really. So,
Absolutely.
with your time at these universities, who did you listen to and who did you learn to listen from? Because critical listening is such an important part of being a musician. I'm just curious what you were
Yes, it
told.
is. Well, just as much as I was listening to my mentors and teachers, I was listening to my friends, like my one of my best friends ever, Debbie Gold, who's an amazing flutist and composer. We were in the same class at USC, and her voice was so different than mine as a composer. I mean, we often, like, in very respectful and nice ways, we often bickered about taste and stuff. We had like very different, um, I think, on how notes are put together and stuff. And yet we both really respected each other's craft and really learned a lot from each other's music. Like I remember, um, this is early on. I now write music with time signatures that change a lot. I love rhythmic stuff. And even then I was doing that a lot. But I had one passage of one piece that was like 6 bars in a row of 4/4. Um,
Ooh,
Too tight.
thank you.
It was a passage that was like 6 bars of 4/4, and I remember she said that third bar, does it really need to be 4/4? Can't that just be can that be a 3/4? Just to, and I said, why? Just because? And she said, well, maybe just because, yeah, just to break it up and to make it. And there's another little lesson, like just tons of little moments like that I
Hmm.
remember from people I heard or were mentored by. I know you're obviously a wonderful saxophonist and interested in the saxophone history of this. I got my sax start in a way not actually at Michigan, but in that last year at USC because I was working with Bruce Broughton, great film composer and concert composer in his own right. Um, Wonderful teacher too, hell of a teacher. And I was going to start a piece with him, chamber piece, and I wanted to do it for oboe and piano. Because I've always loved double reeds, and was thinking about doing like an oboe sonata. I remember showing him a sheet of music with a bunch of handwritten sketches on it, just little, like incipits, little tiny chunks of material. There's nothing fully fleshed out, and he didn't seem to like be material. It was kind of like that could work maybe. You know, what's next? Let's see the next thing. Okay, it's a little short. What's next? And I was starting to feel that I didn't know what, I was like, maybe I should go back and write some more this week. And then there's one little chunk of material at the bottom that was like a little line. And he said, "That's really interesting. What's going on there?" And I said, "Oh, that I wrote that like 10 minutes. I have to be honest with you. I wrote that like 10 minutes before I walked in here, just out in the lobby. But I thought it might be an interesting melodic profile or something." And he said, that one's worth exploring. I don't know why, but that one's worth exploring." And again, talking about encouragement and people, that was like just a bit of excitement that got me like, wow, maybe there's something in that. And that same afternoon, an alto saxophone player, sax guy, named Andrew Harrison, who just started his DMA that month at USC, had heard a couple pieces of mine, and he said, "Hey, you're Jules, right? Man, I gotta talk to you. I really like your sound. I really like your style, and I feel like we would really work well together. I'd love for you to write a piece for me." He just kind of like said it out of the blue. I thought of that little tune, da 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 da, and I thought that might not be an oboe piece after all. Maybe it's a sax piece. Because I got somebody's excited about it. I didn't have an oboist excited,
Yeah.
and so this. Tell a long story here. This goes back to your question of who do you listen to and who excites you. That was a player and a teacher, both encouraging in different ways. And that player, wow, he's one of my good friends now, and I worked with him very closely. And I wrote my alto sax sonata for him in about 2 weeks. I mean, just popped
Wow.
right out. It was, well, it originally was a 2 movement work, the second and third movements. The first movement, which is the longest one I actually wrote when I got to Michigan the next year, because Andrew did a great premiere of it and everything. But I thought it's a sonata. It is. I called it sonata. It's one of the few pieces I have that is kind of like more traditional and in a set style. Might as well do 3 movements just to do it. And so I wrote a bigger, thicker, almost more academic kind of first movement, and then a more fun closing movement, and the middle one's kind of dark and pathos.
Yeah.
So I remember several things Andrew said as a sax player. He was really interested in melodic writing, and he's a very virtuosic guy. But he said, so many people are writing only the virtuosic stuff, and I'm kind of like, honestly, kind of bored by that. I want to write something that's fun to play and that allows me to sing, like vocal stuff.
Mhm.
And wow, it really shaped how I wrote the notes.
I found that in your bassoon sonata as well. You have so many different textures and colors within it that it's awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. And Abby, those are consecutive pieces actually. If I'm not, if memory serves me correct, I wrote that one like next. I think it was like the second or third piece right after that sax sonata. I might have written a choir piece or something in between, but it was in the same year. I know, and yeah, I did like a back to back. I did 3 or 4 sonatas kind of back to back. Someone was saying at the time, you got to write a piece called Nada Sonata. So and when I started in Michigan, I think people thought of me like the sonata person. That went away pretty fast. but there was a little period where I was writing a bunch of that stuff because I find solo instrument and piano really fun, really close to 2 people,
Mhm.
and it's also really challenging. It's challenging to do it in interesting ways and not just make a boring piano accompaniment melody on top.
Yeah,
How can we get a conversation?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So really, this has been a question that I've been asking a lot of my musician friends and even non-musician friends. It's I really find the lack of discourse that we have in music to be interesting when trying to navigate what you're trying to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I found like a crossroads between visual art and auditory art. And it's really interesting because we use the terms like depth and color and texture and so on just to elicit like a certain type of feeling that we're trying to get
Right.
across.
Right.
And I mean, that being said, in your sonata for the bassoon,
Mm-hmm.
um, you've entitled the movements based upon like different weather patterns. So
Yes.
how do you what is the easiest way for you to convey those things? I usually go for emotions. A lot of people I've spoken to have talked about texture, and I think it's just
Amber.
really interesting.
Absolutely. That's a really interesting question. A very insightful question. I think I'm a very visual person. It's one of the reasons I want to be a film composer as my main thing.
Hmm.
Always will write classical stuff, but film I want to be the central part of my life and my creative life. And I think one of the reasons is that visual element. I get it sounds it's almost stupidly simple, but I get really excited musically by that combination of an image and a sonic response to it,
Yeah.
especially when the music's doing something that you don't see, but that you're told to see by having heard the music.
Yeah,
Like,
like
well, I wouldn't have
anticipation.
thought about it in that way had I not heard that connotation. Like,
Oh.
I just I don't know what came to my mind, but a great example of that like a film score is in Patton from 1972, I think. Jerry Goldsmith. And Patton was, of course, this really intense, super macho, crazy guy, war leader and a general. But he had this really soft, like weird side, kind of. And the film was trying to tap into that because it was trying to appeal to young audiences and kind of like almost, even though it was about this war person, it was trying to appeal to almost like younger hippie audiences. So they were looking for like what's the depth of Patton, what's inside this person, and Jerry being the tremendous artist he was, um, didn't just go for the war thing. I mean, there is a patriotic march and there's a piccolo solo kind of suggesting the American optimism and that kind of. But then there's these moments where Patton's walking out of these cemeteries, and he's talking about being reincarnated. He believed in reincarnation, and he says there was a battle here of Carthaginians, and the women were over here and the men were over here, and he's like describing the scene from like 1,000 years ago, and he
Hmm.
says, and then the battle happened, and I was here. I was here. And there's this really weird kind of eerie scene, and there's all this silence, these spaces between these words. And Jerry fills that with distant trumpets going da 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 like little arpeggios, like a little like not taps or anything, but it's almost like a little bugle call, like way off. And he used an instrument or a electric thing called an echoplex, which could create an echo on the trumpet that went da 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 da
So
da.
cool.
And you never hear where it actually ends, but it's going. And are we seeing trumpets or seeing a band or seeing no, but implicit, and it's like you're hearing his memory almost. It
Yeah.
happened something that wasn't there, and so even in concert music, I cannot resist looking for little things like that to do. You know,
Absolutely.
like one example comes to mind is a piece I wrote called Neon Nights, all about South Beach, Miami, and there's not specific visuals exactly on the way, but I really was thinking kind of like gestures and shapes that neon sound like to me, what
Yeah.
neon would sound like, or like if you're driving down like a palm tree lined chic row of nightclubs, what does that sound like? You know, and for me, it's a combination of all those factors: harmony, timbre, could be rhythm. Um, it might be harmony more than anything for me. I don't know why that is.
Really?
Yeah, because I work at the piano and
Yeah.
it just seems to. I think in harmonies all,
That's
and
beautifully
also
put.
tension and release. Tension,
Yeah.
and, it's important too.
Tension and release. I can't tell you how many times in the past probably 3 months I've had that conversation.
I know.
Tension and
I know.
release. That's all it is.
Absolutely.
So I really loved that answer. That was beautifully put. That's different than everything I've heard so far.
Oh, very cool. Great.
Yeah,
Glad
this
to hear.
is one of my favorite questions to ask musicians, and
That's a
even
great.
like non-traditional musicians or amateur musicians. It's important for everybody, and to have that be accessible is just so important.
It's healthy to think about it too, to see what we do as composers, how we, where did this stuff come from? Why are we think, what are we up to?
Absolutely. So, how did you get involved in film?
Well, I did several student films during my USC years. That wasn't as much an indicator as you might think it would be in terms of like knowing I wanted to do it. Only because I just did a couple of them, but um, it's more like I forever, as long as I remember, was obsessed with classical music. Like my very first, I old enough to have had CDs, I guess. um, just before iTunes and everything, and digital, and Spotify certainly. But my very first CD was called Beethoven at Bedtime, and then I got Vivaldi for Valentine's Day, and like Bach for breakfast. I got this Phillips classical series of different composers, and each one was kind of like a highlight reel of each of these composers. Like by like first, I'm the man said like by first or second grade, I was like obsessed with classical music. It was really weird, and I had an elementary school music teacher, Lynn Burgess, who was very. She gave me that first CD, and again another mentor that kind of like just changed the life kind of thing. But literally that same exact time, this would have been like when I was 6 or 7 years old. My dad took me to see Star Wars, the special edition when it was re-released in 1997 in
Mm-hmm.
theaters. So I can honestly say, I mean, I wasn't born in the late '70s, but I can honestly say I know what it felt like to see Star Wars for the first time as like a 6-year-old, because I was 6 when I saw it in a theater,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, and I feel very like looking back, very blessed that that kind of transpired. But by far, the single most important thing I remember was the score,
Yeah.
that music. And I knew even as a 6-year-old, I didn't know I wanted to be a film composer when I grew up, but I knew whoever wrote that did something in me that I want to do in someone else one day, and I don't know how, but and I found out that next day. I think that was John Williams, and I became obsessed with film scores like right then, right alongside the classical stuff, right alongside. So for me, they've always been there, and I've always thought about them both as I just always have insisted I want to like keep my foot in both worlds.
Absolutely. I It's difficult that we have this notion for people to stay in their lane once they choose something and
Isn't it?
draw
I
these
hate that.
fine lines between what we're allowed to do and what we're not.
Do you know the composer Alex Shapiro? Do you know her
No,
music?
I don't.
She's an awesome composer, awesome kind of thought leader in the community. She writes a lot for band, um, but she got her start actually in film and doing kind of indie films, and then switched over to concert music and started with chamber music as her main thing. But now her main gig is kind of wind ensemble writing. And we talk. She's on the board for ASCAP, and she's just a great leader in our field. And I asked her if she could get coffee at Midwest in Chicago last year,
Hmm.
right before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And she was so gracious, and we chatted for like an hour. And one of the things she said was, when I was coming up, like even early '90s, you really had to stay in your lane almost. Like people wouldn't almost let you in their club. It was kind of like the film people were here, the chamber people were here, the orchestra people were here, the band were. And now she said those walls have really they've crumbled down, and you can go between world, and no one cares. No one
Yeah.
really cares. It's just a matter of what you have the time to do and what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. I found that to be difficult. Just, I
Yeah,
mean, saxophonists, you have, again, one foot in the jazz world, one foot in the classical world, and you have,
absolutely similar thing.
yeah,
Absolutely.
people, there's this external pressure to decide, like, what am I doing?
I
And
bet there
really,
is.
I don't, my personal playing does not lie with either of those.
Yeah,
It's not even in between. It's just somewhere out there.
that's cool though. It's like a different thing.
Yeah, I really enjoy it.
That's
Um,
great.
Speaking of, I mean, like individual instruments, how often do you think that the standard repertoire of an instrument is actually able to kind of encapsulate its capability?
Wow. That was great questions. That I don't know about as much. I mean, that one I would say. I guess objectively speaking, it depends on how old the instrument is. I mean, the violin repertoire, for example, is not the same as the percussion repertoire, just because there's centuries more of composers having worked. That being said, the composers that were working during those prior centuries often were in a very stylistic chokehold, so to speak. I mean,
Yeah.
I love the classical period. I love I was classical like Haydn, Mozart, early Beethoven. I love that sound. CP, Bach, even at the beginning of it. But it is very much in a stylistic frame. You know,
Absolutely.
they were doing things that were like within the boundaries, and so they weren't quite. Now there's always exceptions to the rule. Like even Vivaldi, if you look at some of the even like Four Seasons, there's some extended techniques, and he was doing some things that were really pushing the limits of these instruments.
Yeah.
But that was kind of exception. Not I can think of that really pushed the boundaries orchestrationally speaking was Berlioz, and then Wagner.
Yeah.
But then the 20th century is like floodgates open. You have a lot of people pushing boundaries, and now we have people like Kaya Sariaho, Composer, or Espec Sound also finished. I think contemporary composers, Andrew Norman, Mika Mooley, Missy Mazzoli, just plenty of people now that are like, there's not one style.
Yeah.
I've named a bunch of composers that are like doing different things, different sound worlds, and influences are coming from everywhere. One of my good buddies I went to school with in Michigan, Carlos Simon, is he writes all kinds of stuff. He's also has done some film work, but he puts all kinds of things in his music. And you're talking about jazz. He and I both share a love for jazz and jazz harmony too, and he puts a lot of that in his notes. And he grew up in the gospel tradition and playing playing gospel in church. And there's a lot of that in his sound.
That's awesome.
And he'll do it, in the context of an opera or a big orchestra piece. So for the instruments, when they're concerned, I think we're in a great time where everything's happening. In the 60s and 70s, at least in concert music, it was a really rigid way. There was a rigidity to what people were doing, and if you wrote a melody, you were like laughed out. I mean, it was like, get out of the room. You're not a real composer.
Yeah.
It was like that bad. People would like literally disassociate from that they like started writing tone music. It was ridiculous when we look back now, and thankfully those wars are over. But one thing that was happening was a lot of extended technique stuff happening, and a lot of pushing instrumental boundaries. So you have people like Helmut Lachenmann, the composer, who I heard a friend describe it as scratch and sniff music. It's like a lot of techniques, and flutter tongue here and clicks and keys here, and then a multiphonic here, and you don't hear a note for like 3 minutes, like a note on the staff, kind of thing. So we're now, as a composer alive today, I feel like we have great access to all this stuff, and it's trying to find new ways to push a little bit.
I think that's really interesting. You're the youngest of the composers that I'm talking to. And
Oh, cool.
And I really appreciate the fact that you have that kind of open-mindedness. And I really, just being the age that I am, I want to believe that the internet and the capability for us to swap ideas so easily is so important to that concept, that notion.
It is, and I teach. I'm really honored to teach composers. I do about 8 or 9 work with 8 or 9 students a week in composition lessons, and it's been like really. Even though I'm a young guy too, it's been like a real joy to mentor people that are slightly younger than me or about my age. And to me, my attitude is that we shouldn't hold on to these little nuggets of wisdom as secrets or like competitive crap. I hate that. I mean, music is music, and it thrives by sharing and exchange and like giving back. And one of the things I tell all my students is we have the internet, like you said, and it's this tremendous resource. We have an obligation to tap into that resource, and it's not good enough. Like I have a younger student, I won't say who it is or anything, obviously, but I have a younger student who's figuring stuff out and is very confident, and he's going to be great. He's going to be a great composer, but it's hard to get him to commit to score study a little bit. Like, I'll show him one piece by Stravinsky, and he'll say, "Oh, I know 20th century music. I got it." And it's like, well, hold on, there's a little more than just Stravinsky. Let's look at other thing. And so I'm trying to work with that person and trying to really broaden out and just realize, just because you can type in at any time a person and pull up a score doesn't mean you have that knowledge yet.
Yeah.
Just because we have access to the stuff doesn't mean we actually know what it is. And I feel like when Wikipedia came out, even there was like, oh, I can look something up at any time, therefore I don't need to learn about it.
Yeah.
I can always learn about the Franco-Prussian War if I wanted to. I can always type in Franco-Prussian War. But actually, you got to commit to studying it. So I got everybody, including him, a YouTube playlist. And it's like, I want you to make a playlist that says scores. When you find a cool video of a score, add it to it. Like the follow along videos.
Mm-hmm.
That's like our library now. It's one of our...
That's awesome. What a great resource.
Oh yeah, it is. It's a must that we access that resource if we want to be well-read composers.
Yeah, absolutely. What
Please.
kind of humans do you write for? Like, who is your target, both performing and listening audience? I know you're in film, but what kind of person do you want to move with your music?
I want to excite and stimulate people. Like I love the challenge of having someone actually pay. And it sounds simple, but like just pay attention.
Yeah.
Engaging and really grabbing someone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm constantly thinking about pacing as I write. How is this going on for too long? Is this going on for too short? Have I lost their attention? And you can't control that. You can't make everybody love the piece or the whatever. But I try, and I'm always thinking about drawing along the ear. I think it's why I'm attracted to melody because. Or a line, like a good line, because a good line, horizontal, you have no choice but to kind of follow it through. Like if I went, and then just said, we're done, they'd be like, wait, what was next? You want, oh, there we go. And you feel the, if I like the idea of like making the ear come along.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's not answering your question about writing for certain kinds of humans or like who do I like to work with. I get really excited about this stuff, and I like working with musicians who do too. Like I could tell even our first emails that you're certainly someone like that, who's just got great energy and attitude and openness.
Thank you.
And a commitment to it. And those are the musicians I love working with the most. Thankfully, it's a ton of people. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it's just seeking that out. Like that saxophonist I told you about, Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
I've worked with a lot of great saxophonists. And in Michigan, of course, too. I have rarely worked with a musician, period, as driven as Andrew. And as committed and, like, just a worker.
Absolutely.
And he works because he's excited about it. It's not like from any cynicism or anything like that. I'm like trying to get ahead. No, he's working out of passion and just like I don't know. He's got a heart that pushes him and drives. I love people like that.
Yeah, authenticity. One of the most.
Yeah, it has to be authentic.
Absolutely. So speaking of authenticity, wow, I can't speak. In what you write, in what you've heard of your work, there is a certain authenticity to it, and I just want to ask if there's some sort of like clarity or motivation or purpose that you hold to be true and valuable when you write.
I have to always be honest with myself, and if it's not good enough for me, it's not good enough. So, because you have these crossroads when you're composing where it's like, I could do this chord or this chord. I could go to that note next or that note next. And 9 times out of 10, it doesn't make a huge difference. You just have to pick. So, whenever you have the decision-making processes during the writing, I just make sure that it's the one that's most satisfying to me. So, like, I heard that story about Cole Porter once, the great musicals composer, that when he was writing a show tune or something, a melody, he would go like, nope, nope, yes, and then you go, nope, 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 yes, okay, and he would he would pick his melody like checking every single pitch in the octave.
Wow.
Now I don't know if that's true and if he did that constantly, but I don't do exactly that, but I know what that means. Like, I kind of like, whatever that yes is, I don't know where that comes from. That makes me say that's the right chord, but I know I have an instinct of what's the right chord or the right thing at the right time. I try to.
Absolutely.
I try to. And that's what drives me. That's what helps the notes come out.
Yeah. So this is just about my last question, which is perfect timing.
Excellent.
But recently, I've been increasingly aware of the monetization of art and value kind of being portrayed as an economic, like, exchange value above all else. And that really, like, makes this business terrifying.
Hate it too. I hate that.
Yeah. So, as a younger artist who's in the process of, like, establishing yourself in a certain field, how do you feel any sort of, like, external or intrinsic pressures to keep going with what you've been doing? I know that you have a little bit of room to experiment because, I mean, you have feet in multiple communities, but
Well, that's one big thing I think is, I've always tried to do that. I've always tried to have a lot of different pots on the stove. Like, talking about income, for example, I don't have one pure source of income that, like, I rely on for everything. It's a lot of different stuff, and it's a hodgepodge of different things. And I've learned to embrace that chaos and like that, actually. But yeah, that's one way to do it. Because what that means, if you have a lot of different things, not one of them has to be huge.
yeah.
So I can take on a commission that maybe doesn't have a huge price tag, whatever, with it, because I know I've got a few other pots on the stove too.
Yeah.
And I like to kind of diversify my thing,
Yeah.
my working thing. In terms of the money of it, I hate when people bring that into the discussion, all because I've noticed this a lot with wind ensembles. I really drives me crazy. I have heard composers advocate for writing for band because it's cost effective, or it's good financial opportunity for the composer to write a band piece. You'll get a lot of performances. I'm sorry, I grew up in band. I have a real kinship to the band, and I love the history of the wind ensemble, and I love the colors of the wind ensemble. I want to write for it because of the colors of the wind ensemble, not because it might be more lucrative. And also going over to film, like, certainly if you're a top film composer, it's a very lucrative world to be. That has nothing to do with why I want to do it. I mean, I guess it'd be a really nice perk, but it has nothing to do with why I want to do it.
Yeah.
It's
That's authenticity.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess it sounds like a privileged place to be able to say I want to do something because of the purity of it and the love of that thing. But I think as much if we can try to get to that place and try to find a way to make it work to do that, like I've taken on gigs or jobs or things that I, wouldn't be my first choice of doing something because it helps pay for my other things.
Absolutely.
Like right now, I don't know. I mean, I come to mind as someone like Philip Glass who drove taxi cabs till he was like 41.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah, he was a cab driver. If I we're at a different time, in music, I would do that.
You
Absolutely.
froze there for a sec. I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, I was saying I guess the equivalent for us is Uber now or something. But yeah, if it meant leading music or adding on a couple small jobs, I would add those jobs in a heartbeat. No question. It's like a commitment to like sticking with that art and that thing and keeping an eye on the prize. And you just do what you have to get there,
Absolutely. I didn't know that about Philip Glass. What a wonderful way to like meet people.
Oh, and there's he probably looked at it like that too. He probably looked at it like that, which is exactly how you should look at a gig like that. Fran Lebowitz, the writer, she also was a cab driver for years, a couple years in New York. Um, it must be good for the artist.
I think I would enjoy doing something like that.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Anyways, that's all I have for you, but do you have any advice for the younger generation of artists?
Stick to your guns. Stick to your mission. Um, I hate guns. I shouldn't have even said that. I hate that. Stick to your thing. Uh, I'm kind of a pacifist, like a la Benjamin Britten, I guess. But
Yeah.
stay their course. Um, don't let others sway you from your what you know is true, from your truth, from your artistic vision. But when it comes to craft and technique in school, don't be afraid to do what your teachers say at the same time. At least for a time. You don't have to do it forever. But if someone says, the proper way to voice that chord is this, this, and this, there might be other ways to voice it, and realize that. But for that lesson and that day, do the proper way. Because you'll learn something from that too. Like, be independent always, but I've never agreed with being independent and ignorant.
Yeah.
And I think there's something to like having hard-won knowledge, paying your dues. So people make fun of like in the old days when everyone was doing like writing a fugue every single week in composition class. Okay, I would never have my students write a fugue every week for composers, but maybe a few of them. Should we just do no fugues ever at all? People are not writing fugues much anymore, but I wouldn't just chuck that out as like bad knowledge. There's something to be gained in that, but let's make it practical. So always, as you're learning too, for younger person, looking for ways to draw on influences and make it practical and make it a way you can implement it yourself. And it's so simple too, but just staying with it, really keeping your eye on the prize, and making it when you make a commitment to do it. I think it requires so much a commitment that you have to almost say this. You have to say, if the brick wall was right here, I don't care what it would take, I would push right through it. Mm-hmm. If I had to drive taxis or do whatever. The else is thinking that. Philip Glass thought that. And stay the course.
Absolutely. Cool. Well, thank you so much for...
My pleasure. I mean, what a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me, and keep me posted on this, please.
I will. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, and keep me posted. We'll talk to you more soon, Abby.
Absolutely. See ya.
Be well. Have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.
Take care.